entitled The Potential Harm to Blacks of a Second Trump Administration. I spent some time just looking at the legal landscape of a lot of things that should be taken in consideration by any African American who is contemplating a vote for Donald Trump. You need to know up front that this man is, just to cut the chase, he is a white supremacist, and he has been doing a lot of things behind the scene through his administration to promote white supremacy. And I have gone over some of those things. And in case you wasn't with me, in case you weren't with us this morning, let me just review just a couple of things. One, I want you to read this quote from a Holocaust survivor. He says, "Nothing good comes of forgetting." He's referring to the Holocaust. I'm referring to the legacy of slavery, Jim Crow, segregation, systemic racism, institutionalized racism that we continue to deal with. Slavery was abolished. We talked about that this morning pursuant to the 13th Amendment. But there are still what the Supreme Court called the badges and incidents of slavery that continue to live with us. And the people who are descendants of those who wanted us to remain in slavery, those people continue the fight. The demonic forces that have inspired this hatred toward us African Americans is still very much alive. And we need to be, as this Holocaust survivor, Elie Wiesel, says, we need to never forget from whence God has brought us. And we also looked at Deuteronomy 17:16, where God says, never return to Egypt again. Egypt was the place of bondage for Israel, the place of enslavement, the place that, just brought about a lot of, for 400 years actually, very similar to our own situation, brought a lot of again, enslavement to Israel. God says never to return to that place. And I'm saying we as African Americans, we too must make it our business to never, ever allow anyone to take us back to those days. The victory that we have gained over these things were very costly. Which brings me to a photo that I want to share with you that someone sent me this morning. And it's a photo of the son of Medgar Evers, who at his funeral, his son was there crying and weeping over the loss of his father. And he was being comforted by Medgar's widow. Yeah, I mean, that just shows you that this is real. So when we go vote, Medgar Evers, some of you may not even know who he is. Medgar Evers was over the NAACP in Mississippi, and he gave his life trying to get folks registered to vote. So he did not shed his blood. He was shot in the back. He was assassinated. He did not shed his blood for us to vote for white supremacists. We should never forget the sacrifices of people who literally gave their lives or lost their fathers and loved ones in this battle. This was just 50 years ago, 55, 60 years ago that these battles were going on. And how some people now can contemplate voting for a blatant white supremacist like Donald Trump is beyond me. I've summed it up as They simply don't know. And so for that reason, I have been for the last 4 years trying to inform them, okay? Now, let me show you what this fight is all about. This morning we talked about these 7 laws. These are the major laws that protect so much for Black Americans. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery. The 14th Amendment gave us citizenship, equal protection under the law, due process rights. The 15th Amendment prohibits disenfranchisement of Black voters, of Black people. Brown versus Board of Education, we said, overruled Plessy v. Ferguson, the separate but equal doctrine, and it outlawed segregation in public schools. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, 68, etc., prohibits private racial discrimination in places like restaurants, hotels, motels, etc., theaters. These laws protect us in these ways. The Voting Rights Act of 1965, I used that this morning to illustrate that you should never assume that our enemies will not do away with these laws, because they did pretty much that with the Voting Rights Act. And it's the reason that we're literally contending with voter suppression laws during this election. It's the reason why states have been able to get away with reducing the number of early voting days, or tinkering with the U.S. Postal Service to affect mail-in ballots, to, as they did here in Texas, to reduce the number of drop-off locations for mail-in ballots. All of that is voter suppression, racial gerrymandering, which North Carolina has been fighting hard. All of that is the result of the Shelby County versus Holder case that we talked about this morning. The Fair Housing Act of 1968, it is the reason why you're able to live in that mixed or predominantly white neighborhood. It is the only reason why you're able to live there. And I'm warning you that Trump and his administration and those judges that he appointed, all white, are whittling away at each of these laws. I'm warning you of that. I'm issuing you a warning that that's what we have to lose by giving this man another 4 years. These 7 laws are critical for us as African Americans. We must protect them. We must protect this. We cannot vote for anyone who is hostile toward these laws. We can't vote for anyone who wants to repeal or to gut, to overturn these statutes in cases. We can't afford to do that. One of the things we talked about this morning is the fact that our enemies are always engaged in a chess game against us, where they strategically have been working their plan since the end of the Civil War. And we, on the other hand, we tend to play checkers, which means we're responding to their moves, but we don't have a strategy in place to protect ourselves and to continue our advance for racial, social, economic, and political justice. We got to stop playing checkers, and we got to play chess. We've got to strategize. We got to do what our enemies are doing and not just raise up only when there's been some unjust killing of a innocent black person by a white police officer. All right, now, let us move on to talking about the damage that the Trump administration has already done to civil rights in this country. And I started this morning giving you some examples. I'm going to go through it again, and there's quite a bit. So let me get on it. This morning we talked about how on March 31st, 2017, just a couple of months after Trump took office, Jeff Sessions expressed hostility toward consent decrees. Go back to part 1 to understand what the import of that is. On April 11th, 2017, these are just months after Trump took office, he proposed removing a question from the National Survey of Children's Health regarding preschool suspension and expulsion. They don't want the public to know. They don't want the public to know that black children are being are being suspended and are being expelled from school disproportionately. They don't want you to know that. They don't want civil rights organizations to know that. They don't want civil rights attorneys to know that because we'll drag them in court and fight against it. On August 1st, the Trump administration directed the Justice Department to start using its resources not to go after racial discrimination against blacks, which was the reason the Office of Civil Rights exists in the Justice Department, but to start using their resources to go after racism against whites. Believe it or not, reverse discrimination is their focus. This is the Trump administration that we're talking about. These measures hurt a broad base of of black people. That's men, women, and children. This is a white supremacist agenda. Why? Tell me why anyone would vote for someone who's doing these things. A black person. It doesn't make sense for a black person to vote for Donald Trump knowing that he's a white supremacist. This morning I said, and I'm going to repeat it, that person is a race traitor. Now we said if someone is voting for Trump because their conscience won't allow them to vote for the other person because of abortion or some moral issue like that, and you know, I get that, I understand that. But someone who doesn't have some sort of conviction for that type of thing, for a moral issue like that, and is voting for Trump, a black person voting for Trump, and there's not this question about, well, I didn't know he was a racist. This man is blatantly racist. He wants you to know he's racist. He wants white people to know he's racist, because that is a big part of his strategy to get reelected. He knows that white people, or at least he deeply believes that white people for the most part are very racist, and he knows if he talks their language, they're gonna vote for him. And that's why he could very well win a second term, because he has talked their language, their racist language, and they may in record numbers get out to support him. And if that happens, if he wins, I told you why. All right? On August 7th, 2017, the Trump administration filed a brief in the U.S. Supreme Court in a case that involved purging registered voters from states' rolls. They supported that. That's more voter suppression. That's more voter suppression. These are the things that Trump has already done while in office to hurt African Americans. All right? On September 15th, 2017, again, within the first year of his administration, the Trump administration took steps to stop a program that was designed to help build trust between police officers in black communities. He doesn't want to see any rapport, cooperation, and friendliness between police departments in the black community. We know that. He told us that he's all about law and order. And we heard him tell police officers at this big event that he spoke at, don't be nice to people. He told them that. We remember that. Okay? On November 16th, the Trump administration voted to gut this program called Lifeline. And the program was dedicated to take phone and internet services into communities that were low income, that were filled with a lot of people of color and people with disabilities. He gutted a program to do away with that type of effort. That's not his, as a white supremacist, that's not his concern. He's not trying to help people of color, he's trying to harm them. That's what white supremacists do. On November 20th, the Trump administration terminated a program that would have given 59,000 Haitians the ability to live in the United States. And if you remember, Trump infamously said that all Haitians have AIDS. All Haitians have AIDS. You remember him saying that? That's just blatant racism. All Haitians have AIDS. So he took steps to send 59,000 Haitians back to Haiti. On December 21st, the Trump administration rescinded certain documents and letters that would have helped court administrators and judges to reform the practices of imposing excessive fees and fines on poor people. I mean, that's a big issue. I'm a lawyer. I work in the court system. And I see all the time people being held in jail, or people have come out of these cases with large fines and fees, and they're already poor. They can't afford it. Well, he took steps against trying to reform that. All that occurred in 2017. We got 3 more years left. 2018. On November 4th, the Trump administration rescinded guidance that would have allowed states to legalize marijuana. Basically, he was reigniting the war on drugs. Okay? If states want to legalize a small amount of marijuana, or at least decriminalize small amounts of marijuana, states should be allowed to do that. But the Trump administration intervened to prevent that, so that more disproportionately people of color end up in prison, in jail, for possession of marijuana, and those folks are nonviolent. Okay, so this is what a black person is voting for when they cast a vote for Donald Trump. It is literally like taking a pair of scissors and cutting off your nose. I mean, it is literally harming the black community, your people, potentially your children, your family, by casting a vote for an administration with this kind of hostility towards civil rights and people of color. On January 8th, the Trump administration renominated a slate of unqualified and biased judicial nominees. Some of them that were deemed not qualified by the American Bar Association. Well, this is back in 2018. We now know 2 years later that he successfully got several hundred, many of them not qualified, right-wing white supremacist judges on the federal benches across the country. Okay? So he successfully did that. And these judges are not friends of civil rights. These judges, if given the chance, would gut these laws that I just told you about. These laws that were put in place to protect us as African Americans. All right, let's keep working. On February 1st, 2018, the Trump administration rolled back an Obama-era rule that protected working people in the tipping industry. So Obama implemented a rule when he was president that was designed to protect people who depended on tips on their jobs, because a lot of employers would take the tips from these folks. He implemented a rule to prevent that sort of thing. And so, by the way, this goes to show you that it is a flat lie, total, bold-faced lie, when anyone says that Obama didn't do anything for black people. It is a lie. And one of the things that I failed to remember to mention this morning is the fact that he did all he could do contending with a Republican-dominated Senate. Everything he tried to get done would end in the Senate. Okay? Many of his judge appointments were blocked by Mitch McConnell and that GOP Senate. So when we criticize Obama because he didn't do this and didn't do that, how do we so soon forget that for 6 of the 8 years that he was president, he couldn't get hardly anything done? And what he did get done, most of it was by executive order, which Trump immediately after getting elected began to get rid of Obama's executive orders, many of them, like this one. In the first 2 years of his administration, he did a lot for black folks because one of the things he did was he got the Affordable Care Act passed, Obamacare, which provided insurance for a lot of non-insured African Americans. And despite that Republican Senate, he still produced a bunch of jobs, a whole lot more than Trump was able to produce with a GOP Senate. And for the first 2 years of his administration, a GOP House. So it's a lie. It is a lie. It is misinformation or disinformation for anyone, especially black people, to say Obama didn't do anything for blacks. He did a lot, and it would have done more had he not been blocked every step of the way by a Republican Senate. All right, on February 1, the Trump administration gutted the Obama-created Office of Fair Lending and Equal Opportunity, which was the unit responsible for enforcing anti-lending discrimination laws. Because a lot of banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America come to mind, those banks had discriminatory lending practices. When Obama became president, he put in place an office to fight that. As soon as Trump got elected, he gutted that office. And that office was specifically there to protect black folks from predatory lending. Don't say Obama did nothing to help black people. That is false. That's incorrect. That's wrong. The man did all he was able to get done. And what he got done was a lot. When Trump, for example, talks about he produced record unemployment for black Americans, that is dung. Obama inherited an economy that was bleeding 1 million jobs a month. Him and Joe Biden turned it around. And when he left office, he was producing a bunch of jobs, more jobs than Trump is still producing, or jobs that are being produced under Trump's administration. And so the black unemployment, the low black unemployment that Trump brags about was really the work of Obama and Joe Biden. Don't let people tell you that lie. It is not true. On February 26th, this is dear to my heart, the Trump administration gutted a rule that prevents the significant disproportionality in the identification, placement, and discipline of students with disabilities or black students. This is very dear to my heart. I wrote a book on this where I talked about how black kids are disproportionately placed in special education classes, although black kids are not disproportionately in need of special education. They're placed there because of racism. And Obama had in place a rule to prevent that in the Department of Education. Trump gutted that rule. So I just want you to know what you're voting for when you vote for this man, if you're thinking about voting for him. On March 5th, 2018, the Trump administration, through Secretary Ben Carson, who I say is a race traitor, changed HUD's mission statement and removed anti-discrimination language and promises of inclusive communities. So now this is a direct connection with Trump's hatred of HUD. Because remember, HUD sued him in the 70s, him and his father, because they refused to rent apartments to black people. So he's had it out for them ever since. And upon coming in office, he found a black man who was willing to get in there, be his face over at HUD, and that man is now gutting a bunch of Fair Housing Act laws. That's one of the laws I talked about. Let's look at it. Let me take you back to it. Let me put it on the screen. The Fair Housing Act of 1968, it was passed to protect black folks from housing discrimination. Ben Carson has been a disaster at HUD. He has implemented policies that will and are hurting black folks where housing is concerned. And that is all at the direction of Donald Trump. On March 12th, 2020, the Trump administration announced the Justice Department's school safety plan that many believe militarizes schools, over police children, and harm disproportionately students of color. I write about that as well. These zero tolerance policies that a lot of these public schools implement harm black children especially and disproportionately. Trump, when he came in office and appointed Betsy DeVos to run the Department of Education, they implemented more of these kinds of plans and rules, etc. On March 23rd, the Trump administration also funded the Stop School Violence Act, which many in the civil rights organization believe will exacerbate the school-to-prison pipeline. Now, if you know anything about the school-to-prison pipeline, it is the fact that it is pointing to the fact that public schools fail black children, especially black males. And when I say fail, I'm not talking about giving them just failing grades. I'm talking about completely do not educate black kids and push them out and expel them and basically cause them to actually drop out, or they don't read at grade level by the time they reach certain grades. And because of that failure in the public school system, a disproportionate percentage of black males end up in prison. There's a direct connection between failing schools and prison population. It's been said that state legislatures will plan the number of jails that they build by the number of black male dropouts or the reading level of black males. The Trump administration is implementing things to cause more of that hostility toward black males in school. So a vote for Trump is a vote for that sort of stuff. On April 6th, 2018, the Trump administration implemented a zero tolerance policy that separated hundreds of Latino children from their families. We shouldn't be in support of that sort of thing, separating children from their families. It was reported just a week ago that 500-600 of those kids are still separated from their parents, can't find the parents. They did that to us during slavery, separating families like that. We shouldn't be in support of that thing and shouldn't that sort of thing and vote for someone who would do that. On May 24th, 2018, the Trump administration gutted one of the nation's key civil rights laws and weakened consumer protections enacted after the 2008 financial crisis that require banks to be more transparent in their lending practices. Again, something that Obama championed and created. Trump promptly got rid of all of that. And we all know by now, anything that Obama did during his administration, anything, Trump, because of his racism and white supremacy attitude, he tries to do away with it. Doesn't matter how many people it helps, namely Obamacare. On May 24th, the Trump administration refused to implement rules to protect students in online degree programs from being taken off by those schools that cause those students to borrow lots of money for degrees that are oftentimes worthless. Again, a disproportionate percentage of those students are students of color. On June 8th, the Trump administration argued that the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, is unconstitutional, even for people with pre-existing conditions. On June 11th, 2018, the Trump administration delayed implementation of a permanent program for collecting information on arrest-related deaths. In other words, they didn't want police departments to keep a record of how many people die in their custody. Why not? Because the numbers are probably horrible and they don't want the public to know. That's what we actually really need to know in order to fight police brutality against blacks. We need to know how horrible it is. It's probably a lot worse than we realize. But the Trump administration blocked that effort because, again, they don't want us to know. On November 7th, 2018, on his last day as Attorney General, Jeff Sessions basically did away with all consent decrees, which mandates reform in police departments that have high incidents of racial profiling, police brutality against innocent black men. Jeff Sessions gutted consent decrees. They don't want to hold law enforcement accountable for killing innocent, unarmed black people. Why vote for someone who supports such a thing? Why vote for someone, if you're a black person, explain to me why you would vote for that. Why would Kanye West, why would Lil Wayne, 50 Cent, Waka Flocka, why would these rappers whose audience is largely African-American males who are impacted by these policies, why would they vote and support this man, and even in 50 Cent's case, even encourage other blacks to support him? And he stated that he doesn't care that Trump doesn't like black people. In other words, he doesn't care about these Trump administration policies that harm black people. Wow. 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 December 18th, 2018, the Trump administration's School Safety Commission recommended rescinding Obama-era school discipline guidance. Remember, I just told you that public schools disproportionately suspend, discipline, expel black students, especially black males, in an increasing number of even black females. Well, the Trump administration, he works against any reform. They've been working against any reform in this area. Just why? Why in the world would we consider re-electing a man who's done this kind of harm to the black community? And the harm that his administration is doing, that's just one facet. The other facet, and what I believe is going to be the worst part, is the fact that he has all these right-wing, white supremacist judges who are going to be gunning for these laws that protect each and every one of us. I don't care how much money 50 Cent, Kanye West, and all the rest of them have. They're black, and they are affected and impacted by these laws. Okay? Let's keep moving. We're into 2019 now. On January 3rd, 2019, the Trump administration rolled back disparate impact regulations that provide anti-discrimination protections to people of color, women, and others. Let me explain to you what disparate impact means. When you file, for example, a civil rights lawsuit, if you don't have direct proof of racial discrimination, back in the old days, you could point to the fact that a whole lot of other blacks have been impacted disproportionately in the same way that you were impacted. And that could potentially provide enough proof to show racial discrimination, although you had no direct proof of it. Well, they started getting away, they started gutting way back in the Rehnquist court, when William Rehnquist was Chief Justice. They started gutting disparate impact proof back then. The Trump administration has continued to gut being able to show racism based on disparate impact. That's what that means. So if you work in a job and there are 100 blacks on that job and 100 whites on that job, and the 100 blacks all work in menial positions. Okay, so all 100 work in menial positions and all the 100 whites work in supervisory, management, higher paying positions. You could sue that company back in the old days, even if you didn't have direct proof that you were being discriminated against, by pointing to the fact that 100, all the blacks work in these menial jobs. That's disparate impact. Can't do that nowadays, or at least the Trump administration took steps on January 3rd to completely rebut disparate impact regulations. On February 6, 2019, the Trump administration rolled back protections of payday and car title lending rules. Again, this is something Obama put in place to protect disproportionately black Americans who were being taken advantage of by payday loan companies and car title companies. People losing their cars, people paying exorbitant amounts of interest when they would take out loans. And a lot of these people are blacks because these companies are disproportionately located in poor black neighborhoods. Obama tried to do something about that and was doing something about it. Trump gutted all that. On April the 11th, let me get a drink of water. On April 11th, the Trump administration made it harder for independent regulators to respond to risky lending practices. It's connected to what I just talked about. On April 12th, the Trump administration refused to nominate or renominate anyone to the 18-member UN Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination. So they wouldn't even put anyone from the United States government on this UN panel that was created to address racial discrimination. I mean, that's just flat out hostility towards civil rights. I mean, why would any black person vote for this? And thank God most won't. But there are some running around here endorsing this man. I just wonder, do they know all this? That's why I'm doing this video and doing a part 2. On May 24th, the Trump administration weakened non-discrimination protections of Obamacare that will harm millions of people in America by allowing healthcare providers to deny care to marginalized communities. We already have, and is the reason why we have such health disparities, because of the discrimination that's already in the healthcare system for Black Americans. Trump administration is taking actions to increase those healthcare disparities, those health disparities. On July 23rd, 2019, the Trump administration proposed a rule that could cut more than 3 million people from a program called SNAP or food stamps. And you may say, well, people don't need to be on food stamps. Well, let me say this. I agree with you. There should be prosperity enough for people to not need food stamps. But I think about it this way. And my wife helped me understand it this way. By cutting food stamps, you know who you're really hurting? You're hurting children. You're hurting children. Yes, of course, we want adults working. It's better for everybody. It's better for society. It's better for the adult that they are working and earning their way. But before we just start cutting, we need to think about hurting the children, hungry children. They're not at fault if their mother or father are not doing what they're supposed to do. Right? And then some folks are in that situation because they just have to be, at least temporarily. I mean, it's a safety net. This country provides a safety net. And another thing to keep in mind about these safety net type programs is our government gives a whole lot more money to rich people than it does poor people with these subsidies, this corporate welfare. Donald Trump, in the first year of his presidency, gave the top 10 or 1% a $1 trillion tax cut. They didn't even need the money. So don't tell me about helping some poor families keep food on the table when this man gave all these very, very, very uber rich people $1 trillion in tax cuts. Come on. Come on. July 31, 2019, the Trump administration, through Ben Carson, proposed a rule to amend the agency's disparate impact regulations. So I just explained to you what disparate impact is. And so Ben Carson is moving against being able to show racial discrimination by pointing to disparate impact. I'm just speechless when it comes to Ben Carson. We all remember when he was a surgeon. I required my wife and our 2 children to read his books. They read his books. He was an inspiration to the Black community. And how and why he has now become a tool of Trump to harm Black people, it's amazing. I can't explain it. On November 1, the Trump administration, through the Department of Health and Human Services, issued a rule to undo requirements that its grantees ensure that federal taxpayer dollars are not used to fund discrimination. Really? Seriously? Let's keep working this. Hold on just a moment. My phone rang. Let me cut it off. All right. Also, on November 1, 2019, the Trump administration, through the Department of Education, issued a final regulation permitting religious colleges and universities to ignore non-discrimination standards set by accrediting agencies. So religious schools, seminaries, etc., can now do racial discrimination because the Trump administration gutted those rules. On December 18th, 2020, the Trump administration, through the Department of Justice, announced what they called the Operation of Relentless Pursuit, which provides tens of millions of dollars to law enforcement agencies, which civil rights organizations believe will be as bad as the 1994 crime bill. So all of this, I want to point out, undercuts all that he brags about doing in the First Step Act. So if on one hand, he is, funding this law and order thing that results in a whole lot of front side arrest and all of that of poor people, but then he brags about what the First Step Act is doing to reform policing and the criminal justice system. You can't have it both ways. He can't have it both ways. All right, that brings us to 2020. January, see, I'm giving you specific policies that his administration are doing that prove that he's harming African Americans in the background. And remember, the judges could do the worst. They could do the worst damage. Are you with me? All right, so 2020, January 30th, 2020, the Trump administration, through the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, made it easier for states to cap Medicaid spending. And that, again, will result in a lot of disproportionately Black Americans not being able to receive the health care that they need. On February 10th, 2020, once again, Trump, in his budget, the 2021 budget, it included $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid and the Affordable Care Act over 10 years. Now, why is that the case? Why is he doing that? He's doing that for one big reason, and that is to pay for the $1 trillion tax cut that he gave to the top 10% of 1%. He's trying to pay for that tax cut on the backs of poor people and sick people. And a lot of those people who are sick and poor are disproportionately Black people. On March 17th, 2020, the Trump administration weakened affirmative action requirements connected to federal contracts for coronavirus relief. On May 26, 2020, the Trump administration, through the Justice Department, sided with Alabama's requirement that Black voters and voters with disabilities could not do absentee ballots due to COVID-19 pandemic. On May 29th, 2020, Trump vetoed a bipartisan resolution to overturn a Department of Education rule that would have held Secretary DeVos accountable for failing to provide relief to students defrauded for-profit colleges. Again, a lot of those students are disproportionately Black. On June 24th, 2020, the Trump administration went on the record opposing H.R. 7120, which is the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. Now, we all saw what happened to George Floyd. And the House got behind and approved this measure, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, which would have gotten rid of qualified immunity and so on, to help reform policing in America. The Trump administration went on the record in opposition to that. Now, if Biden wins, and if the Democrats keep the House and win the Senate, the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act will become law. It'll become law. Qualified immunity will be over. Police officers will think twice before they shoot innocent, unarmed black people. All of this stuff hangs in the balance. All of this hangs in the balance with who you vote for or whether you vote. On July 7th, 2020, the Trump administration, through the Department of Education, through the Department of Education's Office for Civil Rights, issued a notice proposing changes to the civil rights data collection. Once again, the Trump administration doesn't want the public to know about the discrimination that's in public education. They don't want us to know about it. They don't want civil rights lawyers to know about it. They don't want civil rights organizations to know about it. So very little can be done to address it. All right, on July 23rd, 2020, Secretary Ben Carson terminated the Obama-era affirmatively furthering fair housing rule and replaced it with some other rule. And Obama had that affirmatively furthering fair housing rule in place to combat segregation. And you've been hearing Trump talk about this while he's campaigning, right? So when you hear him talk to white suburban women about protecting their neighborhoods, he's referring to this rule. He's saying, I got rid of the Obama rule that would have allowed black folks to move into your neighborhood. And he did that with the help of a black man. I am not making this stuff up, y'all. Now you understand why I've been so strongly and verbally opposed to Trump. He is working hard. He and the GOP and those judges are working hard to whittle away at these laws. And in some cases, not whittle at them, just get rid of them. Just gut them. They won't do that. Whenever you think that way, I want you to be reminded that you're playing checkers. You're playing checkers. You're not playing chess. You're not thinking strategically. Because they will do it, they are doing it, and they have done it. They will do it, they are doing it, and they have done it. That's what I'm going over now. I'm showing you where they're doing it. On August 18th, 2020, just a couple of months ago, the EEOC signaled its intent to create new rules to thwart workplace discrimination claims. And while I talk about that, I want to specifically mention the very last person who was appointed to the court, Justice Barrett. She said in a case, and I want to specifically mention this, when she was on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, and by the way, Obama had nominated a black woman to be in that position, to be in that seat. Mitch McConnell blocked her, and that's how Amy Barrett got that appointment. And Obama had nominated Merrick Garland to be on the Supreme Court, and Mitch McConnell blocked that appointment. But back to Justice Barrett. When she was on the Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, She said being called a nigger does not create a hostile work environment. So if you're on a job and your coworkers are calling you nigger and you sue, how would you like to hear from the court system that that did not create a hostile work environment for you? Well, that was the last person who was confirmed to the court. And you're sitting here telling me that these people will not go after these laws right here? Yes, they will. Yes, they have. They're doing it now. On September 2nd, the Trump administration threatened to pull federal funding from cities where people were protesting police brutality. So that's what he thinks about people out protesting police brutality. Now, we're all against people looting and rioting and committing violence. A lot of those people, by the way, were not even the ones who were there for police brutality. A lot of those people were right-wingers and some of these other people who were there as agitators, who almost do this as a profession just to create chaos in cities. And they're not really there because of Black Lives Matter, because the folks who are there policing, who are protesting police brutality, is my understanding. In fact, we represented, my law firm represented in 5 peaceful protesters who protested some months ago. And we got all those cases dismissed. And they were peaceful protesters, but they were arrested and harassed by police officers for rioting. And not one of them rioted. Not one of them. I'm glad we were able to get the cases dismissed, and we're working on getting their cases expunged. But Trump wanted to pull federal money from cities where there was protesting going on. On September 4th, 2020, the Trump administration, through Ben Carson, did more to severely weaken the Fair Housing Act. I'm trying to get to a close, but he's done so much. There's a long list, and all these things added up together, they're very, very harmful. We've heard about some of this in the news. For example, on September 4th, the Trump administration, Trump forbid the federal government from doing anti-racist training that addressed white supremacy and white privilege and critical race theory. He called all that divisive and anti-American. These are policies that he put in place. He doesn't want someone to go into these federal agencies and begin to teach people not to be racist, not to be anti-Black, to begin to teach them to be sensitive to their co-workers. He fought against that. He doesn't want that. He says that's anti-American. Well, I guess it is. Because for what we've seen for 401 years, it is American to be racist and to be white supremacists. I guess that, in his mind, is what America is all about. On September 8th, a whistleblower filed a complaint saying that top officials at the Department of Homeland Security directed the analysts there to play down the danger of white supremacist groups and Russian election interference. I'm coming to a close. September 22nd, Trump issued another executive order prohibiting federal agencies from talking about or from having anti-discrimination training. Also on September 22nd, Trump, and this is just a few weeks ago, the Trump administration through the Department of Labor made it easier for employees to misclassify workers and deny them minimum wage and overtime protections. A disproportionate percentage of minimum wage workers are African Americans and Latinos. Okay? This is what a vote for him is voting to support. On September 24th, once again, HUD, under Ben Carson, did more to harm the Fair Housing Act. On October 6, 2020, less than a month ago, the Trump administration, get a load of this, contacted Microsoft and Wells Fargo, and the Trump administration expressed opposition to Microsoft and Wells Fargo commitment to doubling the number of Black and African American managers and senior leaders. They all, those two companies, Microsoft and Wells Fargo, had a commitment, a program in place to double the number of Black and African American managers and senior leaders in their companies by 2025. The Trump administration said that that was unlawful discrimination. I'm not making this up. On October 8th, the Justice Department, in compliance with Trump's executive order outlawing racial sensitivity classes, the Justice Department suspended all diversity and inclusion training. If anyone needs to go through that training, it is the employees, the lawyers, et cetera, of the Justice Department. This man has done considerable harm to civil rights laws the 4 years that he's been in office. And through the appointments that he has placed on the federal bench, he is poised to cause a whole lot more harm over the next 30, 40 years, whether he's reelected or not. But to reelect him gives him even more ability and time to further gut these 7 laws or parts and provisions of these laws. That's what they're really at. Some Black conservatives think that they're going to get in there, those conservative white judges are going to get in there and they're going to be fighting against abortion and gay marriage. Look, just this past term, there was an abortion case that went in front of the Supreme Court, and they had the opportunity then to say something about Roe or even to overturn it potentially. They did not. They sided with the other 4 justices. The same with gay marriage. In fact, the person who wrote the opinion on the gay marriage, the transgender case, was one of Trump's appointees, Neil Gorsuch. They're not there to overturn abortion and gay marriage. They're there to overturn the civil rights laws. That's what they have been training to do the entire time of their careers. John Roberts, Brett Kavanaugh, and Amy Coney Barrett all worked together as young lawyers in either the Reagan administration or on the Bush v. Gore case. So they have a history, a career of there being hostility towards civil rights. And when people didn't vote the last time, when African Americans didn't go out and vote, oh, this doesn't really affect me, oh, this is, what good is there? Or even now, this foolishness we hear coming from some of these blacks about hold the vote and you know, Trump has done more for the black community than Obama, all this dumb stuff. This is the result of it. And there's a whole lot more harm that will be done if more blacks fall for that stuff and don't vote or vote for Trump this time around. This is irrefutable proof that I've given you. It's verifiable. It is not something that I made up. Another 4 years of Trump would be very painful for black Americans. We'll look up and they would have done a whole lot more stuff to prevent us from voting. Those long lines that you see in black communities, those long voting lines, that's all a result of the Shelby County versus Holder case. That's all a result of getting those people on the court, on the Supreme Court, where they're going to do more damage now. For one, I'm committed to fighting for black people. I'm committed. God put that in my heart. You can call it whatever you want to call it. It doesn't make me no difference what you call it or what you think about it. But it is racial justice. It is biblical justice. It is what the Bible says. It is what Jesus tells us to do, to fight for justice, to demand justice. We've heard a lot of preaching on righteousness and holiness and sanctification, but very little on justice. Social, political, economic justice. And so God had to raise up someone's in the body of Christ to remind us, hey, God is a God of justice and righteousness. We've been so heavily influenced by our white evangelical brethren. We've read their books, attended their seminars, attend their churches, where they have put a heavy focus on righteousness and have completely disregarded justice and calls it un-American, socialism, Marxism, to focus on God's justice. And so even we have come out now, many of us with a white supremacist mindset and don't know it, and are now supporting white supremacists. Let me just leave you with this image. The man who left this child fatherless and this wife a widow, that spirit is still prevalent in America. And that's what we're fighting. And that's who Trump represents. And that's why we must oppose him. Thank you for tuning in. Bye.